It is called Mission Impossible, and for a very good reason. Over 2,000 years ago, a man named Jesus was sent to perform a mission impossible on planet Earth. But what was this mission? I don't think people always get it. Yes, it was to save mankind. But how? By dying on a cross? I don't think so. It was to teach them to know the truth, because only one knowledge would set them free from their prisons. But what is it that men thought and believed to be true that was so wrong and yet so powerful that this one false knowledge was destroying the race? And why is it vital today that we understand what Jesus really, really taught? And don't assume we already know it. Or as Stephen Hawking, who recently died, the great physicist, said, "The greatest enemy to knowledge is the illusion of knowledge." He never put anything simply, so to simplify it, if you think you already know the truth, you can't learn it. For millennia, our whole race has fallen into belief, the false belief that they were physical bodies. This belief, false though it was, became their truth. And what did this do? What was the result of this one false belief? And it still is today, that we became subject to the physical laws of the universe. Gravity and time, with their terrible effects, sickness, poverty, limitation, natural disasters, aging, and finally death itself. For thousands of years, men reacted to these awful conditions with fear, hate, jealousy, anger, resentment, depression, and despair. After all, who wouldn't feel these kinds of emotions if you believed that old age and death were the final results of your sad, short life? And all these negative effects flowed from one core belief, only one, that man was a physical body and therefore subject to the laws that govern physical universe. But since equals have no power over each other, this belief, this core belief, led them to form a wrong conclusion. Man began to believe he was powerless and subject to all the outer things on earth, conditions he couldn't change, because he had no idea that he was the power who created them. Millions of men and women were creating hell on earth for thousands of years before Jesus came. The whole earth was governed by universal energy, a field of false beliefs and negative emotions called race consciousness. By the time ancient Rome came to govern the known world, Earth was a solid prison, a planet without hope. The Code of Hammurabi ruled the ancient world with its terrible laws, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Judgments were harsh, punishments were merciless, and there was no understanding, no compassion, and no forgiveness. The God of the Old Testament was a vengeful God of war and retribution. Imagine, he actually reminded us of the Oriental potentates, absolute monarchs, who exercised the power of life and death over their subjects. Cruel, brutal men. But as usual, man made God in his own image and likeness. This God also demanded blood sacrifices. And the Hebrew religion reflected these cruel beliefs. Their laws were so strict that men were killed for minor offenses. Criminal penalties were barbaric. The Hebrew law demanded stoning, a painful and agonizing death. Roman law ordered crucifixion. Both inflicted slow, agonizing deaths. It makes our electric chair today look like a picnic. Today, murder by the state is still legal, but it is less painful. What progress we have made in 2,000 years. PowerPoint 3. I forgot about the PowerPoint. Most people in the days of Jesus worked 16 hours a day, the good old days. They were fishermen, they were shepherds, camel herders, and farmers. Women were exposed to terrible hardships, especially. No drugs eased their labor pains. No stoves, no refrigerators, no washing machines, no air conditioners, no running water, no conditioning, and no plumbing. Sanitary conditions were appalling. If a man divorced a woman, she had no recourse under the law. Women were chattel, and they could not own anything. And it was only a couple hundred years ago that that changed. What progress we are making. If a worker became sick or disabled, there was no unemployment compensation, no welfare, no insurance, no health, no life insurance. If the breadwinner died, his family starved to death, or if they were really lucky, they got sold into slavery and lived. Old age meant poverty and starvation unless one had fathered and mothered a lot of children. No nursing homes, no retirement villages. At age 40, a man was old and a woman was a hag. Progress hasn't been made too much in that area either. Imagine, no glasses, no false teeth, no plastic surgery. Oh my God, what a way to live. Public transportation meant people walking together. There were no schools, only a handful of men in the whole world could read and write. Imagine, just imagine this. I know it's going to be hard, but no radio, no TV, no streaming news to your iPhone, no Netflix to entertain you. Ignorance, poverty, and early deaths. They were the rule of the day. Earth was a savage, primitive world. And as Jesus was born, life on earth was going from bad to worse. We think of the good old days when life was simple. But life was primitive, savage, desperate. Not simple. At this darkest moment in history, Jesus came on a mission impossible. He said to this world, I am the light of the world. The planet was drowning in dark emotions and black thoughts. But he came to reverse this trend. He came to save the world from chaos and show people the path to higher dimensions of evolution. He came to give us life more abundant than the painful, hard, short lives they had then. He came not to destroy. Man was doing a good enough job himself. But he came to fulfill it, to fill the darkness with light, despair with joy, and death with life. He came to inject true knowledge into the false beliefs that had destroyed mankind. He came to cross out, to crucify the old beliefs that men were human, separate from God, not one, and therefore helpless victims of poverty, war, accident, time, space, everything, and anything that was outside in the world. And this mission impossible was impossible to anyone but a God being. For thousands of years, And still today, mankind has believed all these terrible lies. Imagine how difficult it was for Jesus to tell the truth to camel herders and shepherds, that heaven was in their midst. His words were filled with love and hope. Frankly, he sounded crazy because they thought they already knew the truth. But Jesus came and he said, "You're gods, all of you, sons of the Most High." He performed miracles to allow them, to show them that they could overcome sickness. They could overcome blindness, insanity, storms, and even finally death itself. And he said, "Even greater works than these shall you do, because I go to the Father." He demonstrated, he showed them that the terrible conditions could be overcome by us, not just by him. But people had believed in the effects so long that they didn't recognize their Savior when they saw him. You know, you can't recognize anything that you can't imagine might be true. When Jesus performed what the ignorant call miracles, and still do today, he shook the known world. Think of it right now. If someone came in and brought someone back to life who was dead, rabbis and the temples would be threatened. The political activists were horrified to find Jesus teaching love and forgiveness. That doesn't support wars. The moral majority were horrified. He not only didn't condemn sinners, he associated and forgave them. Formal organized religion always condemns the Christ. How could churches be in existence today if everyone understood the truth of what he said and realized that their own bodies were the temple of the one God? Not churches, not temples. Ministers, priests, and rabbis would be as defunct as stagecoach drivers and lamplighters. Out of a job. The need for Jesus' message would not still be existing today if it had ever been understood. If only it had, imagine what it could have been like today. But let's see where we are now. 2,000 years later, false beliefs have still hypnotized the world. If someone repeats the message of Jesus, his real message, he or she is still in danger of being ostracized by tradition-bound religion. Just think, 2,000 years after Jesus came and told us the truth that set us free, mankind is still in a mental prison, believing the same old lies, subject to the same old conditions. PowerPoint 4. Jesus came to say that his manifestations are one, not separate. God is like the canvas of a painting. I think that was supposed to be a PowerPoint. Individuals appear to be, I'm sure we have, that's it, see? Many individuals, but one canvas, one substance, one form, even though it looks like many, many individuals. There is only one canvas, one form, one essence, spirit. But do we believe that yet? With our hearts. Our heads are working on it, but our hearts are far behind. Most of us occasionally have an insight, and then we fall back asleep into the nightmare that we're powerless human beings. PowerPoint 5. Let's contrast Jesus' times now to the present and the progress, the great progress the world has made. Movies, TV, computers, cell phones, lasers, cars, jets, space stations, men on the moon, instruments peering into huge galaxies beyond ours, and the world of tiny subatomic particles. The greatest progress, however, is weaponry. Atomic bombs, H-bombs, submarines, stealth bombers, drones, computer hacking, germ warfare. These make Roman weapons look like toys. Realize this just for a moment. We take for granted these things that 100 years ago, even less than that, people would have called miracles. Yet we still can't believe that the things Jesus said are true. We still think they're too good to be true. Despite all the advances of modern technology, our theology has remained primitive. The basic beliefs remained unchanged since the time of Jesus. Most modern men still believe the ancient lies disguised in modern dress. You don't believe in God, you're an atheist or an agnostic. Those who believe that God can be separated from his creation are called intellectuals. People who fight, spy, conquer, and kill are still called soldiers. The courts still issue death sentences. There are not enough jails to hold our criminals. What progress we have made. We have the population explosion, the information explosion, the pollution explosion, and the atomic explosion. When will we have the explosion of truth, of knowledge, the death of the myth that we are human beings subject to the conditions of physicality? We have gotten to the point now we have the power to destroy our planet. We have learned so much about how to create death and very little about how to create life more abundant. We must start first to believe and then to understand the truth that sets us free. And advanced technology cannot afford this primitive theology any longer. That is the way to the greatest explosion, the sixth extinction of man. Some scientists today are actually warning that this is somewhat imminent. Jesus knew and spoke and lived a life founded on the truth and nothing but the truth. This is what allowed him to perform miracles, acts that we still misname by calling them miracles and not realizing they are natural to the nature of a God being. Remember, things that are called miracles are only miracles to those of infantile spiritual knowledge, men who judge by appearances. To an Aborigine, a plane is a big bird that takes people to heaven. It's a miracle. To a modern man, it's merely a convenience. Those who know the true nature of themselves, boy, how hard that is. And that was Jesus' impossible mission to show us our own true natures, what we really are, what we really can do and be. And I love this part. When a good teacher tries to convey advanced ideas to children, she always uses dramatic stories to excite the children's imagination and to entertain them so they remember the stories. Any teachers here? Anybody still do that? Aha, nobody will admit it. So Jesus taught in parables to Israel. Really great teachers act out the parts as they read them. Jesus was a great actor. His whole life was a series of dramatic pictures in vivid color. Unforgettable scenes. He purposely chose spectacular, melodramatic, sensational incidents. Imagine the birth scene. It's in a stable with a bunch of animals, not in a palace. His father, a carpenter, not a king. His triumphant entry into Jerusalem on what? An ass. And he's astride this donkey, and people are waving palms, not soldiers blowing trumpets, fanfare for the wealth. How his vivid use of contrast certainly were different from anyone who was expecting this Savior. PowerPoint 6. Oh, that's great. That illustrates exactly what I'm saying. He also chose a spectacular death. He carried his own cross up the hill, and he wore a crown, not of gold, but of thorns. And he hung on this cross 3 hours, dying a slow, agonizing death to impress the spiritual children that he was really dead. Then, like a showman, he waited 3 days and came right out of the tomb, even though there was a huge stone in front of it. He showed people that death was a lie. And after 40 days, of showing himself in his risen state, he finally ascended. The next PowerPoint, I think. Nope, hide that. That's the finale. He ascended in a blinding light, way up into the sky. Think of it. Academy Award special effects winner, worthy of Steven Spielberg himself. Jesus knew humanity would grow spiritually eventually over the ages, and finally see through all the stories and all the parables and the great dramas to the truths that they really illustrated. And what was the final great truth that was Jesus' mission impossible to teach? He demonstrated that we are not human material bodies, but deathless spiritual beings of light, wearing costumes for a play on earth. He taught us that what we believe is true for us, even if it isn't true, be it done unto you according to your faith, because we have the power to create whatever we believe and desire, or fear. Truth is actually relative to what you believe, until they realize there is one absolute truth, just one. But if you and I continue to accept these false beliefs as our core beliefs, we have the same problems we continue to have. We have to change. We have to grow up. You know, we all suffer from our delusions. A maniac in a padded cell who thinks he's in hell has all the pain of burning on his skin. But those standing outside the cell looking at him are not touched by it because they don't have the same delusion. And this is like us. We experience our illusions because of our beliefs. The truth is so simple. Your beliefs are the most important thing in your life. Challenge any one of them that doesn't work. I'm going to have to skip ahead here. Not much. PowerPoint 7. Oh, that's it. How interesting. Okay, but I love this. Oh no, the one before that. See the word grace, people who live under grace? It's really an illusion for the God race. That's why people who live under grace live under different laws. They know who they are and what they can do. They have taken back their power. They know the truth, and they are being set free. And then we can go to the greatest enemy of knowledge is not ignorance. It is the illusion that we already know the truth. So be open, wake up, know who we are, and know that we are the power, and there is only one power and one presence, period. Thank you.